When Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, it wrapped its aggression in a slick propaganda package. De-Nazification, demilitarization, and rescuing ethnic Russians from an alleged genocide. These talking points circulated through Kremlin-aligned outlets worldwide. But behind each slogan lies a glaring gap between narrative and reality. Today we're unpacking those claims, examining how they collapse under scrutiny, and revealing the real stakes in Russia's war on Ukrainian independence. 1. De-Nazification, a convenient lie. Russia insists it had to denazify Ukraine, that is, purge the country of extremist nationalism, before invading. But the facts tell a very different story. In 2019, Volodymyr Zelensky, a Russian-speaking Jew whose grandparents survived the Holocaust, won the Ukrainian presidency with over 73% of the vote in a free and fair election. If Ukraine were truly overrun by Nazis, electing a Jewish president would have been unthinkable. In the October 2019 parliamentary elections, Ukraine's most extreme nationalist parties, including Svoboda and the National Core, garnered barely 2% of the vote combined and failed to win any seats. In other words, they had zero influence, zero representation, zero threat. Meanwhile, Russia's own Wagner Group, an unofficial branch of the Russian military, was co-founded by Dmitry Utkin, an open neo-Nazi who sported SS tattoos and named his mercenary outfit after Hitler's favorite composer, Richard Wagner. So if we're talking about Nazis, they're riding shotgun with Moscow, not Kyiv. History adds another layer of irony. From 1939 to 1941, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union were temporary allies under the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. They split Poland between them and even held a joint victory parade at Brest-Litovsk. You won't hear that in today's Russian talking points, but it's crucial context, and it exposes how hollow the denazification excuse really is. In the end, Russia's denazification narrative isn't policy, it's propaganda. It's designed to stir emotions, not reflect reality. 2. Demilitarization. Smokescreen for subjugation. Next, Russia claims it needed to demilitarize Ukraine to neutralize a direct military threat to its own security. But the objective facts tell a different story. By 2022, Ukraine had no nuclear weapons, having relinquished the world's third-largest arsenal in 1994 under the Budapest Memorandum, which Russia signed. That memorandum included security assurances from Russia, the United States, and the United Kingdom to respect Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity. By 2021, Ukraine had no offensive missile systems capable of reaching Moscow, and there were no large deployments of Western ground forces on Ukrainian soil. Yet Russia first violated those Budapest guarantees in 2014 when it annexed Crimea and fomented conflict in eastern Ukraine. Then it repeated that violation in February 2022 by launching a full-scale invasion. So if Ukraine wasn't armed to threaten Russia, what was the Kremlin truly afraid of? The answer lies not in tanks or missiles, but in ideas. Ukraine represents a post-Soviet model that defies Moscow. It's a democracy, imperfect but real. It aspires to European integration. And its people, some of whom speak Russian, refuse to bow to Kremlin control. If Ukraine can successfully pivot westward, other neighbors, Moldova, Georgia, Belarus, might follow suit. That domino effect doesn't threaten Russia's geography. It threatens its imperial model. In short, demilitarization is a euphemism for subjugation. This invasion isn't about Ukraine's tanks, it's about crushing a would-be demonstration of freedom. 3. Protecting ethnic Russians. A fictional pretext. Another common claim is that Russia invaded to stop the genocide of Russian-speaking Ukrainians. But speaking Russian doesn't make you Russian, just as speaking English doesn't make you British. Centuries of Tsarist and Soviet policy forced many Ukrainian communities to adopt the Russian language and customs. These Russian-speaking Ukrainians are Ukrainian citizens, not fifth-column operatives. In 2019, those same Russian-speaking regions overwhelmingly voted for Zelensky, a fellow Russian speaker. If they truly feared genocide, they wouldn't have given him a landslide victory. In 2021, Dmitry Kozak, Putin's own envoy on Ukraine, admitted there was no grounds for military intervention. And the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission, which included hundreds of monitors, including Russian observers, in eastern Ukraine, reported no evidence of systematic persecution of Russian speakers. Meanwhile, in occupied territories, Russia is doing exactly what it claims to prevent, forcibly Russifying Ukrainians. They've banned Ukrainian language schools, burned books, deported children, and opened indoctrination centers. The Kremlin's genocide claim is projection, accusing others of the very crimes it commits. 4. The 2014 Maidan Revolution. Freedom over fear. To understand why Russia refuses to accept Ukraine's independence, we need to rewind to late 2013. President Viktor Yanukovych abruptly rejected a negotiated partnership with the European Union in favor of a bailout deal from Moscow. Ukrainians poured into Maidan Square demanding dignity, democracy, and a European future. No one was demanding war. For 93 days, through freezing temperatures and violent crackdowns, they stood their ground. On February 21, 2014, Yanukovych fled Kiev. The next day, the Ukrainian parliament voted 328-0, including some members of his own party of regions, to remove him for dereliction of duty. This wasn't a coup. It was a lawful, constitutional response by a nation choosing freedom over fear. Yet Russia portrayed it as a Western coup to justify breaking its 1994 commitments. After Maidan, Ukraine made clear it would never be a vassal state. It chose self-determination over Moscow's so-called sphere of influence. Ever since, Russia has insisted Ukraine cannot join NATO, cannot turn westward, under threat of invasion. The 2025 Ultimatum, imperial demands dressed as peace. In early 2025, Russian negotiators publicly outlined conditions for ending hostilities. They demanded that Ukraine abandon every territory Russia failed to conquer, renounce any future NATO membership, disband its military, pardon all pro-Russian collaborators, and abandon its cultural identity in favor of Russian historical narratives. There was no mention of reparations for civilian victims, no accountability for war crimes, and no guarantee of Ukrainian sovereignty. Imagine replacing Ukraine with any other country, Poland, Norway. Would their citizens accept those terms? Of course not. This wasn't a peace offer. It was a total capitulation. Imperial ultimatums in disguise. It underlines that Russia's goal has never been coexistence, but domination. 6. What's really at stake? Freedom versus empire. This isn't a proxy war, nor is it a civil war. It's Russia versus Ukraine, an existential fight. Ukraine is battling for the right to exist, to speak its language, remember its history, and choose its alliances. For centuries, Moscow has tried to crush Ukrainian identity through Tsarist decrees, Stalin's purges, and the Holodomor, a famine engineered by Soviet policies that killed millions of Ukrainians. Each time Ukraine resurfaces, Moscow moves to smother it again. Despite immense human and material cost, Ukraine endures, not because it's perfect, but because it refuses to be subjugated. A free people, even under siege, will fight for their right to chart their own future.